there's a kind of like brute functionality with everything that is also a result of scale model making and prototyping, that like none of the questions have really been resolved in advance. And so the wall system, for example, is something that I'm working out as I'm building it. And so the material reality of it is in flux. My name's Oscar Tuazon, and this is the Los Angeles Water School, or LAWS as I like to call it. We're located a couple blocks from the Los Angeles River. The structure that I'm standing in is zonahedron. It's a part of a much larger structure that has been here for the last couple of years engaging with the river, really. So the structure itself was kind of designed around this water-filled facade. In a way, the structure has like water running through its veins. And when I started to think about that, I was looking for a location. It was a structure in search of a site. And water is like always moving. So the structure moves with water. It isn't in any one particular place. That's kind of what I've realized about it. Over the last couple of years, we've had exhibitions here. It's started kind of with a communally organized exhibition called Language. The energy from that exhibition sort of propelled the structure into existence and quickly started to bring people together around the question of water and had conversations in here. One of our first was a roundtable conversation around Tongva histories of the LA River. We're on Tongva land, and we were really fortunate to welcome Julia Bogigny, who's this book actually, the Tongva Dictionary. And so we kind of went through an etymology of ideas and indigenous thinking around water. So that was kind of where we started. In a way, the distinction between architecture and art, it comes down to duration or movement. In architecture, there's an illusion of permanence, but I think artworks are inherently mobile and impermanent. That's always been kind of a big part of my thinking around exhibitions, is that's a temporary space. To realize that kind of on the scale of a building and to build this space that is in a process of constant motion is really interesting. Just kind of like getting past the idea of even a finished structure at all and just thinking about this process of building as the point in itself. The structure is really now in multiple locations. There's a part of it in East Lansing, Michigan. It's adjacent to Flint and right kind of in the center of the Great Lakes region. So water issues there are really potent. To have the structure there was also like a way of creating space for conversations that were already in process within the community. We were able to check out books from the library and basically build a library around water in the space. So in that way, it has a sort of immediate function within those conversations. There are four very different regional contexts around the question of water, and they're affected in different ways, but water connects us all, and so in a sense, the project tries to kind of create a dispersed map of how clean water moves across big distances and how it connects us. In Spring Valley, Nevada is sort of the destination where all the pieces of the structure will eventually reassemble as a water school around the spring. The work, if it's successful at an infrastructural scale, would kind of disappear into the world in a way. The infrastructural systems that we're talking about around water are pipeline systems. And the infrastructural systems around oil are also these massive oil pipelines that cut across these huge distances, but are basically invisible within the landscape. So there's something vital, I think, about artists intervening and thinking at that scale of infrastructure. The work has to disappear there. And I think that that's also something about mobility impermanence that's really useful when thinking about an artwork, is that it can intervene at critical moments in an infrastructural conversation and then disappear again into the ether. I've always said about the water school is that it's always been here. Like, it's been here before us, and it'll always be here along the river as long as the LA River is running. And the LA River also is a really interesting phenomenon because it appears and it disappears. It's something that we aren't always conscious of here in the city, but it's the lifeblood of the area if you think about it. What I'm doing in the Spring Valley right now is mapping underground water resources and trying to get kind of my layman's understanding around the water that's invisible and how that water is also in constant motion. So it's an interesting site because it's, in a way, a rerun of a story that we're familiar with in Los Angeles from 100 years ago, the Owens Valley Mulholland Pipeline. In Spring Valley, there are 100 natural springs there. The city of Las Vegas now wants to build a 350-mile pipeline to Spring Valley and pump the groundwater. So we're seeing like a similar kind of ecological mistake being repeated 100 years later. The lot that we're standing on, it's like 3,000 square feet, and over the course of a year, with 15 inches annual rainfall in LA, might be able to collect like 40,000 gallons of water. It's a lot. The idea to harvest rainwater and use it here for planting, just to kind of understand the water cycle of this particular site is interesting. It's a circular space, so when people come in, what are we gathering around? There's water at the center. Also then serves a functional aspect in the building. The thermal mass of that much water would keep the structure really cool during the day. This kind of no-tech approach to air conditioning is something that I think is really useful to think about in Los Angeles today. Architecture should serve other people, right? It should serve community in some sense. So like all constraints are a way of people communicating their needs to architecture. I respect that. Having something to adapt around is what makes a building beautiful to me. That's an interesting distinction between art and architecture also, is that a building really exists for other people, and it isn't finished until it's occupied. That communal moment of activating a structure is really different than, to me, the kind of viewership that happens with an artwork, which is kind of like a one-to-one isolated experience. It's a structure in motion, you know? It's not a building. I'd like to occupy that space as long as possible, that kind of liminal space before it's a building, and to live in and occupy the unfinished.